Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive.
Right.
We'd love to get our hands on some interesting educational materials, and today we've got a student workbook all about English for tourism.
Oh, fun.
It's by Ken McIntyre.
Okay.
And I think this will be interesting for a couple of reasons. One, I think a lot of us have traveled and kind of know the feeling of needing to know certain phrases or at least
Okay.
how to, order food or something.
For sure.
And then two, English is kind of the lingua franca of global tourism. So I
Absolutely.
think this will be interesting.
Yeah.
So let's just dive in. So I guess the first thing is imagine yourself arriving in a new country.
Okay. Yeah.
Where does this workbook kind of start us off?
Well, at the airport, of course.
Of course.
So it starts with all the essential vocabulary for arrival and departure. So, things like immigration and customs, baggage claim, and, even reading those tricky boarding passes. It's got it all.
I was thinking about that. You're walking through the airport and there's all these signs and it's like,
Yeah, and if you don't know.
if you don't know what they mean, how do you even... It's
Exactly.
so intimidating.
It is.
So I like that they're starting there, but it's not just single words, right?
No, it's not just a vocabulary list. It actually includes some really great dialogue practice sections.
Oh, cool.
So you can kind of role play common scenarios. Like, what would you say if you need to ask for directions or,
Oh, yeah.
you need to check in for a flight, or even if you have to deal with the dreaded lost bag.
Oh, God, the lost bag.
Nobody wants to.
You know what's funny is I once had to report a lost bag in Italy, and my Italian was so bad.
Oh, no.
It was one of those things where it's like, I wish I had, some prepared phrases or something.
Well, and that's what this workbook, I think, really helps with, is giving you that confidence
Right.
to deal with those kind of situations. And you know what? Speaking of tricky situations,
What?
they actually have a section on deciphering airline tickets.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
Mm.
Because those tiny fonts and the abbreviations and everything, it's like,
Yeah.
what does this even mean?
Right. And there are so many different rules and regulations for baggage and all that.
Do they explain that? It's like baggage allowances and stuff?
They do, and they actually make it pretty fun. They have this recurring character named Mario who sends these postcards from his travels.
Oh, but that's fun.
And in one of his postcards, he talks about how he almost had to pay a huge fee for having an overweight bag.
Oh.
So, he learns a valuable lesson about baggage allowances in a lighthearted way.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's fun. So, okay, so we've gotten through the airport,
Right?
hopefully with all our luggage intact.
Fingers crossed.
Now what?
Now it's time to navigate those timetables and schedules,
Ooh.
which is so important in the tourism industry. And the workbook has a whole section dedicated to understanding the 24-hour clock
Okay.
and how to convert between 12-hour and 24-hour time.
I still get messed up with the 24-hour clock.
Yeah, me too sometimes.
It's especially when I'm tired.
Right.
What kind of examples do they use for that?
So they have one scenario where this traveler is going from Dili to Singapore
Okay.
and then on to New Zealand and then finally to Lisbon. And they have to figure out the time differences and make sure they make their connecting flights on time.
Oh, God, that's a lot of time zones.
It is a lot. It really highlights the importance of being able to convert those times
Absolutely.
quickly and accurately.
I'm starting to feel like this isn't just about knowing vocabulary, but also
Yeah.
feeling confident in a foreign environment.
Totally. And that's a huge part of travel, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just feeling like you can handle whatever comes your way.
Totally.
And speaking of handling things,
Well, what's next?
eventually you're going to need a place to stay.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Right. So the next section is all about hotels. At the hotel.
Okay.
And this is one of the most visually engaging sections, I think. It's got lots of pictures to help you learn key vocabulary. So things like mini bar and balcony,
fun.
even the word porter.
Oh, I like that they include porter.
It's kind of a classic.
It is.
But you might not think to learn it until you need it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about actually talking to hotel staff?
Right.
Do they have that?
Yeah, definitely. There are lots of dialogue exercises for checking in.
Oh, good.
Asking about amenities, understanding things like opening hours for the pool or the restaurant.
Yeah, because, you don't want to be wandering around trying to find something.
No, and you don't want to be rude.
Right.
You want to know how to say things politely in another language.
Exactly.
And sometimes it's not even about politeness, it's about avoiding confusion.
Oh, right.
They have this tip about how in some countries, first floor actually means the ground floor,
Oh, yeah, that's different.
which can be really confusing if you're not expecting it.
Oh, it reminds me of this one time I was in London, and I kept going to the wrong floor because I didn't understand how the floors were numbered.
Oh, I've totally done that too.
It's so confusing.
Yeah, it is.
So we've mastered the airport.
Right.
We've conquered the time zones.
We have.
We've checked into our hotel.
We're doing great.
What's next?
Well, you're probably getting hungry by now.
Oh, yeah.
Right. No trip is complete without experiencing the local cuisine.
Absolutely.
So the workbook has a whole section on at the restaurant,
Okay.
and this is one of my favorites.
I was going to say, this is my favorite part.
It's fun.
It is. Because I'm always so nervous to order food in another country.
Oh, yeah. Why?
I just have this fear of, like, accidentally ordering something totally bizarre.
Yeah.
You know? Like, I don't know what it is, and then it comes out, and I'm like, oh, gosh.
I've definitely been there.
Have you?
Oh, yeah. I've had some interesting meals that way.
Yeah,
But, that's part of the adventure.
it is. But I think I'd feel a lot more confident with some
Right.
vocabulary and phrases under my belt.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what this section aims to do. It gives you all the language you need to navigate a menu,
Okay.
ask for recommendations,
Yeah.
handle different dining scenarios, like buffets versus a la carte ordering.
Speaking of buffets,
Oh, yeah.
I went to a buffet in China once where I had absolutely no idea what anything was.
Oh, no.
I was just pointing at random dishes and hoping for the best.
Oh, my goodness.
It was an adventure, but I think I would have felt a lot better if I'd had learned my language.
I hear you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this section really, I think, helps with that. It helps you feel more comfortable trying new things
right.
and engaging with the local culture through food.
I like that.
Yeah.
Oh, and you know what? It even has some tips on tipping practices in different countries.
Oh, yeah, that's so important.
Because that can be such a minefield.
It really can.
Like, I once accidentally overtipped in Japan, and the server looked at me like I was crazy.
Oh, no.
And I had no idea it was considered rude.
Right, right. Those cultural nuances can really make a big difference.
They really can.
Yeah. And speaking of cultural nuances,
Oh, yes.
the workbook also has this really interesting section on culture tips,
Okay.
specifically for doing business in Timor-Leste.
Oh, wow. So not just for tours, but for, like,
Right.
business travel.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're going there for work,
Okay.
this section is for you.
Cool.
And it covers things like greetings and introductions, the proper way to address people,
Yeah.
how to make appointments, and even tips on entertaining clients.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's really useful.
it is. I mean, you don't want to accidentally offend a potential business partner.
Oh, no.
Right, by doing something that's culturally inappropriate.
It's so important.
It is.
Yeah.
It's about building those cross-cultural bridges and ensuring smooth communication.
Totally. And I
Yeah.
think even if you're not traveling for business,
Right.
cultural awareness is just so important.
Absolutely.
It's about respect and, just making the most of your experience.
Yeah.
It's about being a mindful traveler.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sure.
but let's face it, there's also the less glamorous side of travel,
Oh,
like all the forms and documents and stuff.
oh yeah, the paperwork. Nobody's favorite part.
Right. But so necessary.
It is.
Does the workbook cover that?
It does. They have a whole section on it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it walks you through the process of filling out things like immigration cards and departure cards,
Oh.
making sure you understand, the information they're asking for, like
Right.
your date of arrival, purpose of visit, length of stay.
Yeah, because all those terms and abbreviations can be so confusing.
Right. And they explain all that.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. And, it's not just about avoiding stress at the airport.
Right.
It also emphasizes that it's important to actually understand what those documents say,
Right.
because that information can impact your stay.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I once got stuck at immigration because I filled out a form incorrectly, and it was just a nightmare. I wish I'd had a resource like this.
Yeah. It's
Huh?
like having a personal travel assistant.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's shift gears a bit.
Okay.
What about when you're reading, like, a travel blog or an article about your destination, and they start throwing all these statistics at you
Oh, yeah.
about tourism trends and stuff?
Right.
Do they cover that?
They do. They have a whole section on charts and graphs.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, it's so important to be able to understand those visual representations of data.
It is, but they can be so intimidating.
They can be. But the workbook makes it really accessible.
Yeah.
So they use this real-world example involving Maria's guest house.
Yeah.
And they show you a graph of the guest numbers across different months.
Okay.
And it helps you see how to spot peak seasons, maybe find some hidden gems, when to get the best deals, when to avoid the crowds.
That's so smart.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to know how to say, the hotel is fully booked.
Right.
But it's another to be able to look at a graph and understand, like, why.
Exactly. And that deeper understanding can help you make more informed decisions.
For sure. Okay, I'm really impressed with this workbook.
Me too.
It's like it combines practical language skills with cultural insights.
Yeah.
And even data interpretation.
It's really comprehensive.
It is.
Yeah.
But we haven't talked about grammar yet.
Oh, that's true.
Does the workbook cover that?
It does, but in a clever way.
Oh, how so?
So instead of just, listing a bunch of grammar rules,
Right.
they actually integrate it into the practical scenarios.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it's not about memorizing verb conjugations. It's about seeing how those grammar concepts are actually used in real life.
I like that. So it's like contextualized grammar.
Exactly. Like, for example, when they introduce the concept of countable and uncountable nouns, they use examples from like hotel and restaurant scenarios. So you would say a bottle of water,
Right.
but you would say some bread.
Yeah.
And it helps you understand the subtle differences. That can trip up language learners.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
It's like you're learning grammar, but it's relevant to your travel experiences.
exactly. And they do that with verb tenses, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like in the section on timetables and schedules,
Okay.
they incorporate verb tense practice. So you're learning about time, and you're also solidifying your understanding of how to use verbs like arrive and depart
Oh, that's cool.
in different contexts.
I like that. It's all about making those connections
It is.
between language and like real world application.
Absolutely.
This is really cool. I'm really into this workbook.
Me too. I think it's a great resource.
Yeah. I feel like we've done a pretty good overview of it.
I think so.
But we're going to take a quick break
Okay.
and we'll be back in a moment to keep exploring this English for Tourism workbook.
Sounds good.
Stay tuned.
All right. So, we were talking about food before the break.
Oh yeah, my favorite.
Well, this next section actually talks about something else that you might not think about needing to know.
Oh, okay, like what?
Forms
Oh.
and travel documents.
Oh, the paperwork.
Yeah, the paperwork.
I mean, it's important, but
It is
not the most exciting.
not the most glamorous, no, but this workbook actually has a whole section on how to fill out different kinds of forms.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like immigration cards, departure cards, things like that.
Okay.
And it makes sure that you understand what information is required.
Right.
Like your date of arrival, your purpose of visit, the length of your stay.
Yeah, because those can be so confusing.
Right, like what do they mean by this?
And all those official terms and abbreviations.
Exactly. And they
Right.
break it all down.
I like that.
Yeah, so it's really helpful. And they emphasize that it's important to understand these documents
Right.
because it can impact your stay.
Right, like you don't want to get something wrong
Exactly.
and then have problems later.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I remember one time I got stuck at immigration because I filled out a form incorrectly.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
It was a nightmare.
Yeah.
So yeah, this section I think is really important.
It's like having a little travel assistant.
It is, kind of, like
Mm.
the little guide.
Okay, so we've done the airport,
Yeah.
we've done the hotel, we've done restaurants,
Right.
we've done paperwork.
What else is there?
What else is there? What about when you're trying to figure out, like, the best time to visit a place?
Yeah.
Or you're reading a travel article and it's giving you all these statistics about tourism trends.
Right. That can be overwhelming,
It could be really overwhelming.
especially when you're just trying to plan a vacation.
Right.
But actually, this workbook has a section on that too.
Oh, no way, really?
Yeah, it's called Charts and Graphs.
Yeah.
And it teaches you how to interpret those visual representations of data,
Oh, okay.
which can be really helpful.
Because sometimes those can be so intimidating.
They can be, but they don't have to be. And this section shows you how to break them down and actually understand what they're telling you.
Okay. What kind of examples do they use?
So they use this example of Maria's guest house,
Okay.
and they show a graph of guest numbers across different months.
Oh, interesting.
And it helps you see how to spot peak seasons,
Okay.
find those hidden gems, when to get the best deals, when to avoid the crowds.
Oh, that's so smart.
Right. It's all about being a savvy traveler.
It is. Wow. I'm really impressed with this workbook.
Me too. It's very thorough.
It is. It's like it combines practical language skills with cultural insights and then
Yeah.
even like data interpretation.
Yeah, it's like a holistic approach.
It is. It's really cool.
Mm.
Okay. But before we go any further, I think we need to talk about grammar.
Oh, yeah, grammar, the foundation of language.
Right. Does this workbook address grammar at all?
It does in a really smart way.
Oh, okay. How so?
So instead of just presenting grammar rules in isolation.
Right. A textbook.
Yeah, exactly. They actually integrate it into the scenarios we've been talking about. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So you're learning grammar in context.
So it's not just memorizing rules, it's actually seeing how they're used.
Exactly. Like, for example, when they introduce countable and uncountable nouns,
Okay.
they use examples from hotel and restaurant scenarios.
Okay.
So you would say, like, a bottle of water,
Right.
but you would say some bread.
Right.
It helps you understand the subtle differences.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it just makes it more memorable.
Totally. It's like you're learning grammar, but it's relevant to your travel experiences.
Exactly. And they do that with verb tenses, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in the section on timetables and schedules,
Okay.
they incorporate verb tense practice. So you're learning about time, but you're also solidifying your understanding of how to use verbs like arrive and depart.
I love that.
It's all about making those connections.
Yeah. This workbook is really cool. I feel like they've thought of everything.
They really have. It's very comprehensive. It is. So we've covered a lot of ground here today, but I think we have just a little bit more to discuss.
Okay.
So we'll be right back after a quick break to wrap up our deep dive into English for Tourism. And we're back. We've been deep diving into this English for Tourism workbook.
Yeah, it's really cool.
It is. And we were talking about how they integrate the grammar so well.
Right into those practical scenarios.
Exactly. So you're not just memorizing rules, but you're actually seeing how they work.
And why they matter.
Yeah, exactly. Like with the countable and uncountable nouns.
Oh, yeah, that was a good example.
It was, a bottle of water versus some bread.
It helps you see the difference.
It does. Okay, but I wanted to circle back to something else we talked about earlier.
Okay, what's that?
The culture tips.
Oh, right.
What?
Specifically for Timor-Leste.
Yeah. Did you find those helpful?
I did. I thought the section on greetings and introductions was particularly interesting.
Well, why?
Well, because it highlights how important it is to understand the local customs.
Right.
Like the appropriate level of formality.
And even things like physical contact.
Oh, yeah, like, do you shake hands? Do you...
Exactly. Is a hug expected?
Yeah.
Kiss on the cheek.
Yeah,
It varies so much from culture to culture.
it really does. I remember this one time I was in France for a business meeting,
Oh,
and I went in for a handshake,
yeah.
and the person I was meeting went for a kiss on both cheeks.
Oh, no.
I was so flustered, I didn't know what to do.
I bet. It's those little things that can really throw you off.
They can, especially in a business context.
Right. You want to make a good impression.
Exactly. And it sounds like this workbook can really help with that.
I think so. It gives you that cultural awareness,
Yeah.
which is so important.
Okay, so we've talked about the cultural insights, the grammar, the practical scenarios.
Covered all of them.
We have. Anything else about this workbook that stood out to you?
I think just the overall approach is really impressive.
How so?
Well, it's not just about learning vocabulary and grammar rules.
Right.
It's about giving you the tools to actually use the language, to communicate,
Yes, to communicate effectively in real-world situations.
and to navigate different cultures.
Exactly.
I like that.
Yeah, it's very holistic.
It is. Well, I think we've done a pretty thorough job exploring this English for Tourism workbook.
I think so too.
Any final thoughts for our listeners?
If you're interested in traveling or working in the tourism industry,
Or even just learning English in a practical way?
absolutely, then I would highly recommend checking out this workbook.
Yeah, I agree. It's a fantastic resource.
It is.
All right, well, that's it for today's deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. And to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.